Trump's lies that the guilty verdict against him is illegitimate, and his attempts to destroy Americans' faith in democracy and our justice system are getting some help from Vladimir Putin, Viktor Orban, and Mario Salva, the the number two, I think it's vice prime minister or assistant or whatever it is, number two prime minister in Italy, also an avowed fascist. It's just crazy. I mean, Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, came out and said, if we speak about Trump, the fact is that there simply is the elimination, in effect, of political rivals by all means possible, legal and illegal. It's obvious. Right. This sort of propaganda is called irregular warfare, or IW, warfare by means outside of troops and bombs and navies and things like that. And we used to be experts at this. We had the Voice of America, we had Radio Liberty, we had Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe. There was a keen observer of this process, a fellow who was fascinated by Americans' irregular warfare techniques that brought down the Soviet Union ultimately. His name was Vladimir Putin, and he was stationed in East Berlin, in East Germany, back in the day. When the Berlin Wall fell, he moved to Moscow, where in 1999 he became the leader of Russia and is now the longest-serving leader since Stalin. And he's pretty much committed to helping get his man Trump into the White House. In Trump's first month in the White House, he had a secret meeting with Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov and the Russian ambassador Kislyak, and brought them into the White House, forbade any U.S. press from even knowing that it was happening, and gave them the name of an American and Israeli spy in Syria. At the time, Russia was involved in a war in Syria, and these guys really wanted this spy's name. Trump gave it to them. 2 months later, U.S. intelligence had to pull another spy out of Russia, this one close enough to Putin that he could photograph things on Putin's desk, because Trump had apparently given his name to Putin as well. Putting Trump into office may have been the most successful irregular warfare program Putin has ever run against America. On July 31st, 2019, as he was ramping up his 2020 campaign, he had another one of more than 16 private unrecorded conversations with Putin. The White House told Congress at the time that this was about wildfires. Right. No droids in this car. The following week, on August 2nd, the Daily Beast's Betsy Swan reported that Trump had just asked the Office of the Director of National Intelligence for a list of all of America's spies around the world. And that request had the intelligence officials, according to the New York Times, quote, experiencing disquiet. 14 months later, the New York Times ran a story with the headline, Captured, Killed, or Compromised, CIA admits to losing dozens of informants. And they alerted American spies all around the world that their identities had probably been compromised, apparently by Donald Trump himself. Also in 2019, when the international press verified that Putin was paying the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, a bounty for killing American soldiers, and already 4 American soldiers had died and Russia had paid bounties for them. The intelligence officials asked Trump to ask Russia to stop doing this or demand that they stop doing this. Trump refused to do that. Instead, what he did was he shut down 10 U.S. Air Force bases in Afghanistan. There were 11. That left only 1 Air Force base that Joe Biden, President Biden, the incoming president, could use to get Americans and our allies out of the country, which led to this just, bumble mess of comedy of errors getting people out that led to the death of several Americans and a whole bunch of Afghan civilians, excuse me. Trump refused to demand that that Russia stop paying bounties for American soldiers. And then Michael McCall, Corey Mills, and Michael Lawler, all Republicans on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, started using the problems that President Biden encountered because Trump had shut down these Air Force bases. They started using those problems as a club to beat up Joe Biden. Surprise, surprise, right? Trump also took an axe to the Voice of America. This is an institution hated by Putin for half a century, and basically turned them into a pro-Russia propaganda outlet, which is still going on. Just 3 months ago, The Hill ran an article titled, "Putin's Influencers, Why is Taxpayer-Funded VOA Spreading His Propaganda?" Here in the United States, Congress created in 2021 a branch of the Department of Defense called the Irregular Warfare Center. And they pointed out that in May of 2016, there were two protest groups facing off in Houston near an Islamic cultural center. One group opposed to Islam in the United States, the other group defending Islam. Turns out both groups were formed, created, promoted, and got people in the streets on Facebook by Russian operatives pretending to be Americans, in both cases. The same thing happened in February of 2022 when NBC News reported that far-right influencers were boosting the idea that there were biolabs in American biolabs, weapon labs, in Ukraine. And then Russia used that as an excuse a week later to invade Ukraine. Again, this came from Russia, but it was being reported here in the United States. During the summer of 2020, as Trump and Biden were squaring off for the election that year, here in Oregon, in Klamath Falls, 200 locals showed up with guns, baseball bats, hammers, shovels, anything they could use as a weapon, because they were told on Facebook that George Soros had paid for a bus filled with black Antifa BLM protesters that were going to come to Oregon, to Klamath Falls, to terrorize the white people there. Of course, there was no such thing. But it happened all over the country. It happened in Forks, Washington. They actually brought out a chainsaw and felled trees to shut down the city, the one town into the city from the Portland side of the city, or the Seattle side, one or the other. It happened from Danville, California to Jacksonville, Florida. You had small towns that were convinced that weekend that black Antifa people were coming to their town to terrorize them. This was all the work of Russian intelligence, all of it. Most recently, I think Putin's greatest information warfare success came last July when federal district judge Terry Doty, a hard-right Trump appointee, blocked federal agencies from informing social media companies about Russian efforts to spread disinformation on their platforms. And now you've got members of Congress trying to make that law. By the way, it went before the Supreme Court. They heard arguments in March. We don't yet know the decision. But this is the simple reality is that Russia's been using information warfare techniques against the United States for a decade now in support of Donald Trump. And it's going to get really, really wild fall when the election actually starts. And expect to see a lot of AI lies, visual now lies, auditory now lies, in addition to just, words on paper or on your computer screen. This is going to get wild, as Trump said, when he invited people to January 6th. Come, it'll be wild. Yeah. I'm not holding my breath about any good outcome here.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Have you noticed this kind of thing, this kind of Russian operations on Twitter, on Facebook, on other social media?